So I'm just west of downtown Ithaca, New York, at the Groundswell Incubator Farm at Eco Village, Ithaca. I'm going to link to this down in the description. And we just did a multi-hour workshop today with a really wonderful group of folks where we talked about converting a marginal, challenging shrubland, thorny bramble area into the start of permanent raised beds on contour with swales in a Hugelmound style with deep mulch. And so this is our work after a day. And we took some videos throughout the day talking about working with an A-frame, talking about laying up the start of beds, why you would want them on contour, etc. And so hopefully this video is useful. It's going to be a whole bunch of shots of that day filmed. So stick with us if you're interested in seeing how we got to this in an afternoon with a nice crew of people. We'll start laying out our raised bed with brush and debris, and then we'll cap our raised bed by harvesting soil from upslope. We'll talk about that in greater detail, but that gives us a soil cap that we can seed into and start sketching out the actual swale where water flowing through the surface can be captured and soaked into the bed. And I think all of that's going to reveal itself as we actually do it, so I won't talk too much about it. So I'll just, again, very briefly talk about the A-frame, and then I'm going to hand it off for other folks to do. And so, does someone want to be our formal marking person? You're close. Would you mind? So let's say this is the start of where we're going to make this bed, and of course we can continue on later. If you put a good handful at our starting point,
am I putting it on the side or in the
just
middle, or?
yeah, like just roughly right there. This is rough sketching, right? And once we've made the excavation with the shovel, you come back later after a rain or when it's really wet, and you can make more adjustments. And so now we've got 2 points that describe lines of equal elevation in the landscape, because this was I just actually put this down and it worked, but I just want to show once more. If I come to this point, and from here you can see I need to bring this end down slope and up slope. What you want to avoid doing is, although that really, you're in the same plane, so it shouldn't do much, but somewhere in there, now you hit a rock or a tuft of grass or a log, it's going to change things. So this is a not incredibly fine tool, but that's perfect enough.
Yeah.
Right? Because so like if you're following the contour intimately, you'd say, well, it goes down, or the contour line goes up into here and back down. We're not going to get crazy with that. I'm going to hand this off to someone else. It's going to fall. Who wants to do it? And
there.
you can now move.
You can swivel it too.
You can swing it around as well.
Swiveling is kind of fun. You're not in the right.
What do you have to say about
Think about swiveling it.
Oh yeah, keep your points. Yeah.
using the land, the full
Oh, that looks good.
pretty good area that you have for just like that compost?
You like that?
Looks good.
Yeah, I mean that's a big.
Okay, so try swiveling it this way.
Yep. Yeah. Well,
Is that making sense for folks?
Yeah.
So what's we'll hear it for everyone's sake.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, especially if we're working with smaller areas, how you kind of compromise between using your full land versus the contour.
Yeah, I think there's a balance between laying out your beds exactly, perfectly, laser level on contour, and then the reality of your existing access and flow or existing impediments. So maybe there's a tree there, maybe there's a driveway, maybe there's a house, so that's a subjective call. I think it's important to know about these tools and know why you would care to plant on contour, why you would care to terraform on contour, so that water can come down through the landscape and be distributed across a bed, and then match that with your needs and your reality, right? So if there's machines that are coming through, animals that are grazing, all sorts of different layers. In this case, we've got a mowed area that we know we need to keep open-ish, and a flow and access through here, and then it opens up into a wild space. And we've got pretty decent slope. So on that whole continuum, designing closer to putting it on contour really makes sense. and then we can get the flow and access to match that a little bit later. Does that? Okay.
How far are we going?
Maybe we'll go a little bit further, and then we can pause, and then it's easy enough to carry on with it. The batteries on that don't run out too quickly.
Yeah.
And we can, if we wanted, infer between the dotted lines with just a little sketch. You know, again, we're not worried about like this kind of thing, like, oh, wait a minute, right? We're ballparking it because we're going to be laying big piles of brush on top of this. So that's a very, very basic way to measure out contour. Thank you for filming that part.
Are you
That's
good with
That's
that?
enough. So we've got this sketch laid out, and now what we can start to do, we've got this mountain of brush, and we want to put this meaningfully in the landscape. And so the workflow with this, again, is to clear enough to then find contour within reason, depending on your needs, and then to start laying out coarse debris. In true Hugelmound stuff, they would excavate out a big thing and fill it with logs and all this kind of stuff, but we don't have huge rotting 4-foot diameter ancient trees. We've got this material, so we can lay this on slope, and then as after effect would be to get our walkways excavated, and we'll do that as a team with hand tools and cover our beds, and it should all really gel at that point. So what we can do, there's spiky stuff in here, so depending on your gloves, you may want to do this with tools. We're also going to want to have loppers in hand for this, for the grapevines. For one thing you want to avoid, took me years to realize this, honeysuckle and woody debris like this, if you start laying this down, it takes a very long time or a lot of weight for that to break down. So, the more you want to take a moment or two and knock it down so it lays relatively flat. And feel free to stomp. You can have a tantrum if you want. So if we have groups of people that are drawing the material out and laying it on this contour, kind of refining it, you could use the hay fork to kind of shape it and sculpt with it. Then we can start taking this material and using it to thicken our sketch and build a sublayer of organic matter within these gardens.
Would there be a risk if you were to, this has been cut, it's dead, but like say I didn't have enough of that material and I started cutting that, the fact that it's newly cut, would it start to set root?
It's absolutely possible. So again, with all of this, that's why I made sure at the very outset I was clear, this is the start of a great raised bed.
Yeah.
If you fill it with freshly cut privet and forsythia and willow and elderberry, it's going to be a luscious green wall of that material growing, which is fine so long as you're ready to come back through and shake the soil off and lay them on top. It's all nutrient cycling. It's all pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. It's making nitrogen and doing fertilizing work. This material, we're not worried at all. If anything, I'm actually seeing this as a little bit lean, like it's a very carbon heavy, so we're going to want to make sure we bulk this out with rotting hay or manure or soil. All this stuff is feral and we're going to be interacting with it in the long run, so I'm not scared of it sprouting again. It's easy enough to pull it, shake it, and lay it back on top. At least that's my experience with it, and why we wouldn't want to commit this to our cut and come again spinach crop for the first year and depend on it for income, because it's going to be a loose interaction for a while. Cool, I'm going to shush up and let folks, or have folks do fun things. One additional layer. We have it on contour enough that water coming down through slope should be held by this a bit. if we wanted to really facilitate that and really help the water hold and not just run underneath, you know, over time as this rots down and the roots go down, it'll become more and more able to take on running water. But if we wanted to facilitate that, this is basically just depends on your level of energy, how many people you have, tools and all that. Doing some excavation on the upslope side and sending that material onto your mound. First of all, it adds more soil and organic matter to where your production's going to happen. And the more of that you shave down, the more water can come into this trough, your walkway, and spread across the whole bed and be infiltrated in. So the longer the water sits, the longer the dry soil has a chance to soak it in, right? It's like when you have a dry pot and you pour water, it just rushes right through. So when we're in a drought and then you get that 2-inch bomb of rain, most of that water will run right through if the soil's dry. And so what we can do here is basically go through with the shovel and shave and flip that material. What I would avoid is putting it on this compost, because then we're just adding more weeds. We don't need more organic matter, but it's a great way to bulk out and cover. It's also a good way to kind of smooth out your walkways and simplify things. It deals with some of the weeds a little bit. What I would avoid doing is, well, because it's rocky enough, it'd be hard anyway. What you don't want to do is this kind of treatment, where you get huge pocks all throughout. Instead, ideally, you're shaving. And this takes some getting used to. I feel like I've clocked so many hours doing this work. But if you have a lightweight shovel, especially if you have a big file, we didn't do it with this one, but it makes a huge difference. Like a nice big flat file, and you put the shovel on a firm surface, and you just file it so that this section is sharp. It makes this really a lot easier. And so I'll just go through and shave and flip. This could be a teamwork thing where one person does the shaving and another person kind of cleans up behind them. But even that will help water sit for a little while. Once this is done, this is a real ankle buster situation. So this is a perfect opportunity to fill with wood chips or leaves or hay, and the water will still be able to soak in and sit, but it'll make your walkway a lot more comfortable and more level, and it bulks out your bed. So optional but recommended. I mean, we could add more to this. Obviously there's some areas where if we had more compost, maybe what we want to do is we put some more chips or hay over the rough, coarse debris. We've got the areas that we can think about seeding out to cover crop or planting into the summer. And then folks went through and started a really good rough sketch of a swale to have water be slowed down, to spread the water and be able to sink into the beds. But as we mentioned, and as you all can see, this sort of earthwork can be really rough and dangerous. And so if we have enough chips, or if you have rotted leaves, or if you have hay, although I think chips are by a landslide ideal. Also, if you had a ton of cardboard, this would be one of the places where you could lay cardboard on the sod where you haven't dug in and then dump chips. It seems like I'm going to undo all of your hard work, but it's there because you've taken the soil out. It's going to work. And what we'll do, and you can use your feet to level this. I'll just do a little section because other folks can do it. You just basically scuffle walk. And if we had more cardboard, we can do it. It's easy enough to mow in here if you need to. We could also go heavier on the chips. But because the soil has been cut out, water will still infiltrate through those chips. This would be the perfect leverage place to inoculate with wine cap mushrooms if you wanted to have an additional yield of really beautiful edible mushrooms. This would be a perfect place to put uninoculated biochar, especially if you had questionable sources of water coming in from upslope. But charcoal in this trench over time would soak up a tremendous amount of nutrient. And in the fall or next spring, you could shave this a little bit more and refine it based on your observations. Oh, it's too wet here, so I will dig it down to where it was too dry to get the wetness to pitch. And you'll notice you've got relatively smooth walkway. You know, it's not as ankle bust worthy. And you can add more chips than you think you would need because they're going to settle a little bit. And so if folks want to take the wheelbarrows and do the dump and shuffle, then we'll be able to smooth this back out and have a secret swale underneath the wood chips that are soaking in water and distributing it. Does that make sense?